Since the ongoing pandemic, many are working from home, including employees in the financial sector. Did that increase cybersecurity risks? Welcome to Finance.swiss. Today I'm joined by Florian Schütz. He's a Swiss Federal Cybersecurity Delegate to find out more. So let's start with the home office situation. Did you see that this increased the vulnerability of companies?
So actually we couldn't confirm the increase of vulnerability. What we've rather seen is a shift in risk. So, suddenly the offices are empty, social engineering attacks on office premises to then enter computer networks became less feasible. Home office is also for the attackers. And that actually means that you also get more targeted potentially at home, and you have an intermixing of your private and work life. And of course, their attackers could use an angle over a private email address using some phishing. We didn't really see an increase in incidents and also reports. Quite the contrary, actually. We've seen people becoming more aware.
So according to S&P Global Ratings, the financial sector was the most heavily hit by cyber attacks over the past 5 years worldwide. Does that apply for Switzerland as well? And what kind of threats are the most common ones?
So we don't have exact numbers, but usually the global percentages apply in Switzerland as well. And it's quite logic that the financial sector is heavily targeted, because we see, according to the Verizon data breach report, for example, more than 80% is really organized crime, and they are after money. And the banks have the money. So you go there, and instead of doing a bank robbery, you use digital means in a highly digitalized world. Not to be said that we don't have attacks on other sectors as well, but we also see that the finance sector actually since many years is aware of that. Credit card fraud is nothing new. It's been known, and with the rise of the internet and payments with credit cards and internet, this became a problem and they addressed it. Banks are very good at calculating loss and calculating risk, so it also comes a little bit more natural in that sector.
Can one even have 100% of security?
No, you can't. It's mathematically impossible. On the other hand, you don't want that. In the end, it's about risk. It's, you want to have a certain risk appetite in order to do business, in order to be innovative, and you win some, you lose some. And in the end, you're trying to find that sweet spot. Of course, there are some no-go areas, right? Like your customer data. You have a responsibility to protect them. In many countries, you actually also have a legal obligation to protect them. So it's always important to understand where can you do trade-offs or not. And that's, by the way, why cybersecurity is a top-level topic and not just a pure technology topic.
Can one say that Switzerland is somehow safer when it comes to cybersecurity, maybe because of protecting data, because of certain laws?
I wouldn't go that far. I do think the way we do cybersecurity in Switzerland has certain benefits. We have really good infrastructure. We are a little bit less good at when it comes to digital services. But in general, we are aware we are a nation with a lot of technology and a lot of technology knowledge. We have at the Federal Institutes of Technology, they're among the best universities in the world, also in the area of IT. I think what we struggle a bit with and where we need to improve is actually our cultural approach. And I mentioned it's a top-level topic, right? And quite often top-level things, we don't need to know about technology. That's not true. The thing you manage, you need to understand and know. And that's, by the way, an interesting development when tech companies enter financial markets. They basically understand that they need to talk to the engineer. And I think that will be one of the big challenges. On the other hand, we also have very interesting startup technologies. We have innovation. There, the key question is how can we use that technology to protect Switzerland better? And that's, by the way, also one of our responsibility. How can we generate, as a government, framing conditions that decrease financial burden? But there also, how can we actually make Swiss startups stay here in a risk-averse market and be competitive?
Do you have any concrete examples for such technologies or startups that are looking to that field?
There are a couple of examples, but one I would like to highlight is actually that ETH Zurich, Professor Perrig developed a new routing protocol. Routing is how does a communication come from one point to another. Today, it's hard to define where this communication goes through, and sometimes it might go through a country that might try to listen into that communication. The innovation that was made there is basically that you can define the path, and by that limit it to Switzerland, for example. And there was a pilot that actually SIX and the Swiss National Bank did together with a couple of banks, and it looked very promising as it increased the security of the communication, but it also decreased risk of failure, and it decreased failure over time, which enables new business models.
Okay, so this was an experiment. When will this be implemented?
I don't know. That's something you need to talk to the National Bank or SIX about. But I think the important takeaway is that actually in a industry, in the banking sector, that is, risk is their daily bread and butter business, and IT needs to function. If they talk positive about something, of course, we at the government, we ask ourselves, where could we also use that? How can we increase resiliency?
So in February of this year, the Swiss Federal Audit Office actually did a report, and they criticized banks for their intransparency when it comes to reporting cyber attacks. Now, there are a few reasons for that, I assume. So how are you at the National Cybersecurity Center cooperating with banks and trying to get more data from them?
Yeah, so I think first we need to understand the dynamics of that criticism. On the one hand, we have the fear of the institutes from overregulation. And there it's a trust matter, right? For example, if you take denial of service attacks on a low scale, I'm not talking the big ones, they happen on a daily basis. This is normal, right? But there is a fear that if you see all the individual events, you try to regulate something. On the other hand, FINMA as a regulator, they need to have the data, because you can't just put sensible regulation in place if you have the data. And actually, together with the important players from the financial sector, we started a project to increasing the cybersecurity resiliency in the financial markets. We are discussing the idea of an information sharing and analysis center. They exist also in the US, for example. There's a European one. Would like to give it a Swiss twist with a little operational unit that can then basically anonymize and accumulate that data in order to supply it to the regulator in a manner that addresses both concerns.
And this is pleasing banks?
Yes, so far it is. Of course, I think the biggest success is there are a lot of organizations with a different goal, and sometimes they're competing amongst each other, but they're all there, they're all talking about it, they're also putting work effort in it, which renders me very positive we're going to succeed.
And let's look at security at a global scale. Does Switzerland somehow help or contribute to a more secure financial services sector?
So I do think Switzerland already contributes to more cybersecurity in the financial sector. Swiss institutions, but also SIX, who operates a lot of the infrastructure, invest heavily in cybersecurity, and they also share best practices and knowledge. They also collaborate very well. I also think we can do even more. I talked a little bit about innovation and talked about this one startup. I do think we have other great startups. And I do think because we are so interconnected and finance sector per se is interconnected, but also Switzerland plays an important role with other markets like Singapore, for example, or like the UK financial market. And I do think we can push technology there for the benefit of everyone.
Florian Schütz, thank you very much.
Thank you.
For more information on the Swiss Financial Center, go and visit Finance.swiss.